James needs this money more than you do, Emma, my father announced, standing in our backyard during what was supposed to be my Harvard acceptance celebration. The fairy lights we'd hung that morning suddenly felt mockingly festive as he continued. He's struggling with his startup, and this is his chance to make it big. My name is Emma Sullivan, and at 18, I watched my parents try to give away my college fund, money my grandparents had set aside specifically for my education, to my 23-year-old brother who dropped out of 3 colleges and burned through his own fund finding himself. My mother stood beside my father, nodding enthusiastically. Your brother has real vision, honey. His tech idea could revolutionize social media. Besides, you're so smart, you'll figure something out. I looked around at our gathered family members, watching their reactions. Aunt Patricia was studying her wine glass intently, avoiding eye contact. Uncle Mike seemed suddenly fascinated by the garden flowers. Only my grandmother, sitting quietly in the corner, met my gaze with a knowing smile. James lounged in his chair, smirking. Thanks, Mom and Dad. I knew you'd understand how important this opportunity is. Emma's just going to study boring old biochemistry anyway. I stayed silent, sipping my lemonade while my parents detailed their plans for my $180,000 college fund. They'd already spoken to the bank. The transfer would happen tomorrow morning. James needed the capital for his revolutionary app, something about connecting dog walkers with professional dog photographers. He'd already failed with his previous ideas. A dating app for vegetarians, a social network for people who collect rocks, and most recently, a cryptocurrency based on cat memes. Emma? My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. You're being very quiet, dear. We know this is a surprise, but family helps family. Your brother really needs this. I set down my glass carefully. When were you planning to tell me about this decision? Well, we're telling you now, my father said, his tone suggesting I was being difficult. We thought your Harvard acceptance party would be the perfect time. Show you how the family supports each other. Supports each other, I repeated slowly. Like when James borrowed my car last month and returned it with an empty tank and a dented fender. That was different, my mother jumped in. Accidents happen. Or like when he borrowed my laptop for his last startup and sold it to fund his cryptocurrency idea. James rolled his eyes. You got it back eventually. After Grandma made you buy me a new one, I reminded him. My grandmother's quiet chuckle from the corner drew everyone's attention. She'd been watching the scene unfold with an amused expression that made me wonder if she knew something the others didn't. Emma, my father's voice took on that stern tone he used when he expected immediate compliance. This isn't up for discussion. The transfer is happening tomorrow. James needs this opportunity, and you, well, you've always been good at figuring things out. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my dress, the one I'd bought specially for this celebration. You're right, Dad. I am good at figuring things out. My mother beamed, probably thinking I was agreeing with their plan. That's my girl, always so practical. In fact, I continued, reaching for my bag. I figured something out 2 weeks ago when Grandma mentioned you'd been asking about accessing my college fund. A smile froze on my mother's face. My father's eyebrows drew together. James sat up straighter, suddenly looking less smug. What do you mean? He demanded. I pulled out an envelope, the one that had arrived yesterday, the one I'd been planning to share during the celebration before my parents hijacked it with their announcement. I mean this, I said, holding up the letter. My full scholarship to Harvard. Complete tuition coverage, plus a $50,000 research grant for my work in biochemistry. The boring stuff, as James calls it. The silence that fell over the backyard was deafening. My mother's mouth opened and closed without sound. My father's face reddened. James looked like he'd swallowed something sour. But the college fund, my mother stammered, is legally mine. I finished for her. Grandma made sure of that when she set it up. Any changes require my signature, not yours. My grandmother finally stood up, walking over to stand beside me. I told you both last week when you called me, she said to my parents. Emma's future isn't yours to sacrifice for James's latest scheme. Mother, my father started, but she held up her hand. No, David. You and Sandra have enabled enough of James's failures. You won't do it with Emma's future. I looked around at my family's shocked faces, at the fairy lights twinkling obliviously above us, at the "Congratulations, Emma" banner hanging limply in the evening breeze. This wasn't how I'd imagined celebrating my acceptance to Harvard, but somehow it felt right. For years, I'd watched my parents pour resources into James's endless stream of failed ventures while expecting me to understand, to be the practical one, the responsible one. The party's over, I announced calmly. Thank you all for coming. I have some packing to do. As I turned to leave, my grandmother's arm linked through mine. I heard James sputter behind me. But what about my app? I paused, looking back over my shoulder. I hear dog walking pays pretty well these days. Maybe start there. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. James had apparently spent the night convincing our parents that my selfishness would ruin his chances at success. My mother's texts ranged from guilt-tripping, "How could you embarrass your brother like that?" to outright emotional manipulation. I cried all night thinking about how we raised such an ungrateful daughter. I was in my room, organizing my research papers when my father stormed in, waving his phone. "The bank just called. They can't process the transfer without your signature. This is ridiculous, Emma. Your brother has real potential." I looked up from my desk calmly. "So do I, Dad. That's what this whole party was supposed to be about, remember? Harvard? Full scholarship? Research grant?" "That's different," he insisted, running his hands through his graying hair. "You've always been self-sufficient. James needs more support to find his path." His path? I couldn't help but laugh. "He's had 4 paths in 3 years, each one funded by you and Mom. When does it end?" Before he could respond, James appeared in my doorway, looking unusually disheveled. "I have investors interested," he announced. "They just need to see some initial capital to know we're serious." "Emma, come on, you don't even need this money now." I turned back to my papers, sorting them into neat piles. Those wouldn't be the same investors who were definitely interested in your cat cryptocurrency, would they? He flushed. "That was different. This idea is solid. I've got market research." "Let me guess," I interrupted. "You asked people at the dog park if they'd use your app." "It's called grassroots market research." My grandmother chose that moment to arrive, letting herself in with the key she'd always had. She took in the scene: my father's frustrated stance, James's desperate expression, and my calm sorting, with a raised eyebrow. "I see the morning is going well," she observed dryly. "Mother," my father started, "please tell Emma she's being unreasonable. James has a real opportunity here." Like his opportunity to revolutionize vegetarian dating, Grandma cut in. Or was it the rock collecting social network that was going to make him the next Mark Zuckerberg? James threw his hands up. "Why does everyone keep bringing up past projects? This is different." "Because history repeats itself," I said, standing up. "And I'm tired of being the family's backup plan. Every time James needs money, he looked to me. My car fund in high school. Gone for his first startup. My laptop. Sold for his cryptocurrency scheme. Even my graduation money disappeared into his investment account." My grandmother moved to stand beside me, her presence solid and reassuring. "The college fund stays where it is," she stated firmly. "Emma will use it for her postgraduate studies or whatever else she chooses." That was always the intention when her grandfather and I set it up. "But Mom," my father tried again. "Nub David, I've watched you and Sandra pour money into James's schemes while taking Emma's achievements for granted. It stops now." Just then, my mother appeared, clutching a stack of papers. "Look what I found," she announced triumphantly. "Emma's trust agreement. There's a clause about family emergencies." "Which this is not," Grandma interrupted. "Unless you count James's chronic inability to hold a real job as an emergency." The silence that followed was heavy. James slumped against the doorframe. My father stared out the window, and my mother's hands trembled slightly as she held the trust documents. "I have a proposition," I said finally. Everyone turned to look at me. "James wants to prove his business acumen. Fine. I'll make you a deal." "What kind of deal?" James asked suspiciously. "Get a job. Any job. Hold it for 6 months. Show you can actually commit to something. If you do that, I'll consider investing a small portion, and I mean small, of my fund in your next venture." "A job? Like a regular job?" He looked horrified at the thought. "Yes, James," Grandma said, catching on to my plan. "The kind where you show up every day, do actual work, and earn a paycheck." Novel concept, I know. But my app will still be there in 6 months if it's really such a brilliant idea," I pointed out. My parents exchanged glances. They knew this was probably the best offer James would get, but it clearly wasn't the easy solution they'd hoped for. 6 months is a long time, my mother said weakly. Not compared to 4 years of medical school, I replied. Which is my plan after Harvard, by the way, just in case anyone was actually interested. Grandma squeezed my shoulder proudly. Well, she said, I believe that settles things. David, Sandra, I suggest you start helping James with his resume instead of trying to access Emma's college fund. And James? She fixed him with a stern look. The dog walking service down the street is hiring. Maybe start there, for market research. As my family filed out of my room, looking slightly shell-shocked, I returned to organizing my papers. My future was secure, not just because of the scholarship, but because I'd finally stood up for myself. James would have to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, and my parents, well, they'd have to learn to see me as more than just their backup plan. 3 months into my first semester at Harvard, I received an unexpected text from Aunt Patricia. Attached was a photo of James in a navy polo shirt and chakis, looking surprisingly professional while walking 3 dogs. He actually did it, she wrote, 2 months at Happy Tails Dog Services and counting. Your grandmother is beyond smug. I smiled, remembering the chaos that followed my ultimatum. James had initially tried to find loopholes, applying for social media influencer positions and attempting to convince our parents that his cryptocurrency trading counted as employment. But Grandma, now fully invested in my 6-month challenge, shut down each attempt. Real job, regular paychecks, she'd insisted, wielding her influence with the precision of a surgeon, or no investment conversation. My phone buzzed again. This time it was James himself. These rich people actually pay extra for dog photo shoots. Maybe my app idea wasn't so crazy. Maybe, I replied. But now you're learning the business from the ground up. My dorm room at Harvard had become my sanctuary. Shelves lined with biochemistry textbooks, walls decorated with molecular structure diagrams, and my desk covered in research papers. I was thriving, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working on a research project that was already gaining attention in the department. A knock at my door interrupted my studying. My roommate handed me a thick envelope that had been delivered to our dorm. Inside was a letter from my mother, something she'd never done before, usually sticking to texts or brief phone calls. Dear Emma, it began, the handwriting unusually careful. Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking. Watching James these past months, seeing him actually stick to something, it's made us realize how wrong we were. We spent so many years trying to force success for him that we took your success for granted. I sat on my bed, continuing to read. She wrote about watching my first presentation at Harvard's undergraduate research symposium via video link, how proud she felt seeing me confidently explain complex theories to a room full of professors. We should have been doing this all along, she admitted. Celebrating your achievements instead of treating them as expected. The letter went on, detailing how James's job had changed him. He was getting up early, learning responsibility, and even saving money. The dog walking service had promoted him to assistant manager, impressed by his genuine connection with their clients, both human and canine. Your grandmother, Mom wrote, reminds us daily that this was your doing. Your challenge forced him to grow up in ways our enabling never did. We owe you an apology, not just for the college fund incident, but for every time we overlooked your accomplishments in favor of managing James's failures. As if summoned by the mention of her name, my phone lit up with a call from Grandma. Your brother just opened his first savings account, she announced without preamble. Nearly fainted when he saw how much he earned in tips alone. Turns out honest work pays better than failed apps. I laughed, settling back against my pillows. How are Mom and Dad handling it? Oh, they're adapting. Your father actually bragged about James's promotion at his golf club instead of making excuses for another startup failure. And your mother? Well, she's finally started displaying your academic awards in the living room instead of hiding them in the study. Better late than never, I suppose. Indeed. There was a pause. They miss you, They're finally realizing what they almost sacrificed, pushing you aside for James's schemes. I thought about my mother's letter, my father's recent awkward but genuine emails about my research, and James's gradual transformation into someone who actually understood the value of work. 6 months are almost up, I noted. Grandma hummed. James hasn't mentioned the app idea in weeks. Apparently, he's taking business classes at the community college instead. Says he wants to understand finance before asking anyone to invest in his ideas. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. That weekend, I received another photo, this time from my father. It showed my Harvard acceptance letter and scholarship announcement, professionally framed and hanging prominently in our living room. Next to it was a new addition, a newspaper clipping about my research project, which had just received additional funding from the university. Your mother insisted, he wrote, said it's time we showed off the right kind of success. As I prepared for my evening lab session, I thought about how different things were from that tense night in our backyard. My college fund remained untouched, growing steadily for my future medical school plans. James had found purpose in honest work, discovering he had a talent for customer service and business operations. And my parents, they were learning, slowly but surely, that supporting their children meant more than just throwing money at problems. My grandmother had been right all along. Sometimes the best investment wasn't in a flashy startup or a revolutionary app, but in letting people find their own path, even if that path started with walking dogs or studying boring old biochemistry. Success, she told me during our last call, comes in many forms. Your brother needed to learn that lesson, but perhaps your parents needed it even more. Looking at my reflection in the lab window, dressed in my white coat and safety goggles, I couldn't help but agree. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply succeeding on your own terms and letting others learn from the example you set.